in 10, 9, 8.
Well, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be around the country. Welcome to the U.S. Sailing Race Administration Town Hall. I'm Dave Perry. I'm sitting in Southport, Connecticut, where I've been sitting for a long time, but it's where I live, and I'm very happy here. And I'm a member of the U.S. Sailing Board of Directors and chair of the U.S. Sailing Appeals Committee. And I'll be your moderator for the session tonight. The purpose of the town hall is to bring together all of you U.S. sailing race officials, the community of race officials in the U.S. First of all, to get your questions and any feedback you have on the recent 21-page report from the board-appointed Race Administration Task Force. You've all been sent the link to that, and this is a chance to ask any questions or have any comments on that. And then secondly, for the Race Administration committees at U.S. Sailing, just to listen to you, to hear your comments, your concerns, your suggestions, so that as next steps are taken, your input is being well taken part of that, and you feel part of the process. So that's our goal tonight. I'd like to now introduce you our fearless and peerless leader, the president of U.S. Sailing, Corey Sertle, who is just elected to be one of the 7 vice presidents of world sailing. Congratulations, Corey. Corey's from Rochester, New York, and she has a few words for you. And Corey, just come off mute. You're saying some great things, but here we go.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks for moderating our panel tonight. And thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I'd like to first start out by thanking all of you for volunteering for sailing in the various roles that you take on to support racing sailboats in the United States. U.S. Sailing's board has spent some time during the last 6 months refocusing our strategic direction and considering how we are fulfilling the role and responsibilities of being the national governing body for the sport of sailing. Core to our responsibilities are providing a level playing field for the sport, and all of you are essential in delivering racing across the country. I find being part of the Olympic movement to be inspiring, not just for our athletes who are focusing at the highest levels, but also for all of us who volunteer for the sport. Just like our athletes, we are all on the journey toward excellence with trying to be better at what we do. It is in this spirit of striving for excellence that I asked Charlie Arms to chair the task force that brought forward the recommendations we are here tonight to receive feedback on. In fact, one of the recommendations was to hold this town hall. Before I turn this back over to Dave Perry, and on an international relations note, I'd like to highlight the race officials who volunteer at World Sailing as part of U.S. Sailing's delegation. On our Racing Rules Committee at World Sailing, we have Dick Rose and Jim Capron, who've been long members of those committees and given tons to that work of our racing rules. On race management, we have Tom Duggan, who is the PRO for the Tokyo Olympics. A huge honor to have Tom in that role. And moving forward, we have nominated 2 members of our race officials community, Kevin Hawkins for judges and David Pyron to the umpires committee. We hope that we can get them on those committees and be part of our World Sailing group moving forward. In addition to 19 reappointments that occurred over the last month, I'd like to congratulate 3 individuals for their initial appointments from World Sailing. Those are Taryn Teague from Annapolis, Maryland, who was just appointed as an international race officer. Taryn is chair of the U.S. Sailing Race Management Committee. Steve Shupak from Costa Mesa, California, was just appointed as an international judge, and Steve is the regional administrative judge for Area J. And Polk Wagner from Lafayette Hill, Pennsylvania, as an international measurer in the J70 class. Again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for serving our sport. And I look forward to the next hour of listening, learning from you. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Corey. Before we get into the program tonight, this has been a difficult year and a challenging year, and more so than most years, we've said goodbye to many wonderful people, and I think it would be appropriate if we just take 10 seconds of silence. You can mention any name you might have in your mind out loud to remember those who have done so much for the sport and have been such a part of our lives who are no longer with us. I'm going to mention my friend Harry Anderson.
I'm going to mention my friend and our friend, Jeff Ewenson.
Well, thank you for that. We all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and they will never be forgotten. A couple of administrative announcements. First of all, this session is being recorded, so please keep that in mind. And the idea is that the recording will be made available to all sailors in the U.S. Keep an eye on the Starboard portal going forward so that all the actions at U.S. Sailing are as transparent as possible and everyone knows what's going on and can give their input and be aware. Second of all, you're all welcomed and encouraged to ask questions. This is like a town hall that we're not in the same room, but we are in the same space. And thanks to the wonders of Zoom and YouTube, you have a chance to ask questions, make comments, make anything you want to say. You just put it in your comment section on the YouTube platform. And we have 3 members of the Race Administration Program monitoring your chat. We have Jeff Johnson from San Diego, California, Lynn Lynch from Portsmouth, Rhode Island, and our own Matt Hill, who's the U.S. Sailing Race Administration Director from Barrington, Rhode Island. So they'll be monitoring your comments and they'll be forwarding to me any questions you might have for the panel, and I'll pass it along. And that'll be in as close to real time as possible. So you have plenty of chance to get input tonight. Please don't be shy. So let me introduce to you our panel tonight. And I'm going to ask each one of them to let you know where they're from and a little bit about why they're here on the panel. So first of all, you've met Corey Sertle. Next up is Charlie Arms.
Thanks, Dave. I'm Charlie Arms. I'm from California, living in Annapolis, Maryland, and I am on the board of directors as well and chair of the Race Admin Task Force. And I'd like to thank the 3 members you already mentioned, Randy Drafts, Jeff Johnson, and Lynn Lynch. And then we also have Sarah Ashton, Kathy Lindgren, and Geraldine Beal, who served on the task force.
Fantastic. All right, Randy Drafts.
Randy Drafts from Charleston, South Carolina these days, and also currently the Race Admin Committee Chair.
Tony Ray.
Yeah, I'm Tony Ray. I live in Newport, Rhode Island. I'm a professional sailor and coach and a member of the board of directors. And Dave mentioned standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, I feel like I'm surrounded by giants well on this call, just looking at Dave, who's a real mentor of mine, growing up through the sport. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to be on the race course this summer that Lynn Lynch ran, and then another one that Matt Hill ran here in Newport, and been to Randy Drafts' event in Charleston, of course, many times. Fantastic event. And I'm certain that I've been on race courses that Jeff's run as well out in San Diego. So pleasure to be here and happy to help tonight.
Fantastic. I'll just mention that Tony is taking it on himself to begin to think about putting together some organization of the pro sailors in the country. And not only how can U.S. Sailing help them, but how can they help us? And I think there's some questions about the pro sailing aspect that Tony, you'll be able to help us with later on too. All right, Jack Gearhart.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening, everybody. Jack Gearhart, the CEO of U.S. Sailing. I've been in this role, it's about 10 years. I've also had the pleasure of being on the volunteer side. I just finished up as Commodore of the Beverly Yacht Club in Marion. And I took my one-day race management seminar at the Oklahoma City Boat Club on Lake Hefner about, I don't know, 10 years ago. So that was a great experience. Had a lot of fun down there. Anyway, looking forward to tonight and glad to be on the call.
Great. And Peter Glass.
Thanks, Dave. Peter Glass, Chief Marketing Officer for U.S. Sailing, which is both marketing and communications. And I'm presently living in Barrington, Rhode Island, but I've spent a good amount of my career out on the West Coast. So I'd like to think that I'm, representing both the East and the West this evening. And I just want to mention that, prior to joining U.S. Sailing 2 years ago, I worked in the ski industry and got an opportunity, to start there with understanding how valuable volunteerism is, and really seeing firsthand, both in skiing and sailing, that, volunteerism is really what allows the sport to progress and to thrive. And so I just want to start out this evening saying thank you, because I do realize how important it is for everything that everyone does that is watching tonight.
Great. Well, you have a wonderful panel here, and let's get into it. So as a reminder, the main focus tonight is to focus on the report of the Race Administration Task Force, to ask questions about that, not only what they said, but what are some of the recommendations going forward, and to give any input. So that's our focus tonight. How is this going to work? We've received about 20 questions ahead of time on the report. I've organized them, and I will be asking certain questions to certain members of the panel, and they'll give their answer. And then other panelists might want to hop on and add something. And in the meantime, if you have a question about what we're talking about, or you want to ask a question to the panelists, just put it in your comment section on YouTube there, and then Matt will pass it along. And so we will have lots of chance for input. The three main areas of the report were education and training, certification, and then organizational effectiveness. And that's roughly how the questions have been organized, though obviously there's a lot of overlap there. Our target length tonight is about 90 minutes, around 9:30 on the East Coast. If we end before then, fine. That's our target. To be sure we get to as many questions as possible, I'm going to play good cop, bad cop. So if I move you along, or if you don't hear your question answered, or you wanted to say something you didn't have time, you can always send an email to Matt Hill. And his email is raceadmin@ussailing.org. raceadmin@ussailing.org. So there's plenty of chance to give input, and please take advantage of it. So here we go. Our first question is to Charlie Arms, and I'm just going to read these verbatim. Charlie, the question was, with 90 to 95% of the respondents to your report being certified race officials, does the answer to the question you ask, is the current program of certifying race officials meeting the needs of U.S. Sailing members statistically relevant? It may be serving the needs of the people who are becoming certified, which was the group that responded to the survey. But what about the other 2,000 or so people who didn't respond, who are trying to become certified? Charlie?
Okay, thanks, Dave. So we sent about almost 3,000 surveys out, and the target that we sent out was to anyone who had been certified in the last 5 years, who had taken a seminar class. So I went and looked up the statistics on it, and only about just over almost 6% said they had no certification, but 26% said they were in training. So a judge in training or an umpire in training. So those are folks who aren't certified yet. So I think, the number is really more like 30%. We do want to keep finding out from those who aren't certified yet what they think. And we do ask for feedback after all the seminar questions. And one of the recommendations was to reach out to the membership at large and get more information. So we're always looking for other ways to reach out and find out what our members think.
Fantastic. One of our participants wrote in for getting feedback from competitors. Something as simple as checking in with the competitors in the parking lot after the race can be extremely useful. Surprised it wasn't mentioned in the report. So, and I read something in there about a possibility of maybe even doing a survey with the competitors. Did you guys discuss that?
Is this still to me?
Yes, Charlie.
Yes. So
yeah, getting feedback and reaching out to those that aren't.
Yep. So our goal is to come up with a feedback system that's online and super easy, so that competitors after a regatta could click on the link and give us feedback. Just a quick, few questions. The PRO was A, B, C, or D. I was in a hearing and the judges were good, bad, and different. So we do have sort of a constant data of feedback on our officials that we can turn around then and coach our officials that maybe are getting negative feedback, get them coached up to meeting the standard, and having some background if we have an issue that comes up, see if there's a trend. So we are working on a survey for competitors that would be available for any regatta.
Wonderful. All right. One of the things when you ask people for questions, you hear what people think. And here's a question for Corey. Corey, this questioner says, U.S. Sailing appears to put its major focus into the Olympics through major financial and extensive staff support. The 2,000 plus volunteers that organize and run the races for the elite athletes, even before they are elite athletes, do not get the same support from U.S. Sailing. These volunteers pay annual dues, pay for training and continuing education, pay to travel to the events they serve. Further, staff support's minimal. Does the board of directors feel this is equitable? Do they have any plans to shift focus, even a small amount, to the volunteer race officials and trainees?
That's a great question, Dave, and one that's really, hits a sweet spot in my heart because I know how important this aspect is core to our sport, making sure that we have race officials that are serving our sport and providing the level playing field for what we do in sailing. And absolutely, while it appears that Olympics takes center stage because we do, hear a lot about our Olympic team, and as I said in my opening remarks, we should be inspired by them. It's equally important that we take care of our core business, which is racing sailors and all the racing that we do as racing sailors.
Fantastic. All right. Would any of the panelists like to add on to what Corey just said about supporting the growth of all the sport? Good. All right. So Jack, this is to you. This questioner asks, what's the value proposition for becoming a certified U.S. Sailing race official? What's in it for them? This other person wrote in, I keep my membership current solely for being a race official. I'm not clear on any additional benefits that gets me.
Thanks, Dave. And again, thanks everybody for being here tonight. I think the value proposition for U.S. Sailing and being a member has several segments to it. One and 2/3 of our members actually, through some research that we do, join U.S. Sailing to support the sport. And I think you can look at it as the race officials, all of you on this call, contribute an incredible amount to the sport, both to U.S. Sailing, to your local clubs, to your local sailors, and that's a big investment and a big contribution on its own. I think, collectively as a group, as a constituency that's working to, advance the sport, improve race officiating, providing, great competition for sailors across the country. It's done at a local level by everybody like yourself, but it also takes, coordination, and it takes people like the folks that are on the call here, like Jeff and Lynn and Charlie, that are working in developing the curriculum for more people to become skilled. And that's where the membership dollars and the membership support really helps. It's helping us advance the programs that we have. And, I think all of us on this call, and certainly at the Board of U.S. Sailing, feel that, everybody that gets out in a sailboat race should be a member. And that's what we're working towards, so we can, enhance the resources that are available to develop programs like this. But I think, what's the value proposition to the race officials? It's about, I think, supporting their community and being part of that and showing leadership there. And it's also, there's also some concrete benefits. There's the liability insurance that we provide. There are the discounts. There's the rule books and the rule app that we're doing. So there's some, sort of very tactile benefits that are there to support you and the sailors. And then there's the, hey, supporting the sport, which is really important. And as volunteers, that's what keeps it going, as Peter said. So there's, depending how you look at it, I think there's a lot of value in U.S. Sailing, and the support that the staff team provides. Can we always use more? We can, and we're always working hard to improve the efficiencies and the allocation of our resources to better support you out in the field. And again, so anyway, I know that's a question we get all the time, and I really appreciate, and all of us do, your ongoing support, both as members and race officials.
Okay. Anyone want to add to that? I know a great sailing coach who is no longer with us, a guy named Joe Duplin, was the coach of the tough sailing team for years and years, and a great star sailor, a big man with little Babe Ruth legs, and he built boats like no one. And he said once that if a job is worth doing, it's worth doing right. And I've always felt, and I think many of us feel the same way, that if you're going to do something, whether it's running the race or hearing a protest or even doing registration, if you have a job to do, you want to do it as well as possible. And when you do a job well, there's quite a bit of pride that should come along with that. The jobs we're doing aren't simple. They can't be done by anyone, and they certainly can't be done by someone who's not trained and have some expertise in the field. So I think pride, to me, is a real value proposition in becoming certified, to getting to a level where an association like US Sailing will say, you're certified. We give you this stamp of approval. You're ready to go. And I think pride is, to me, should be, or is, for me personally, always a motivator. So let's add that to that. Well, Randy, along the same line, this question comes with a sub message. It says, why is volunteer appreciation only for PROs? Does the PRO set and move the marks, run the flags, do the timing? Obviously not. Yet US Sailing consistently ignores the dedicated volunteers who do the hard and physical work of running a race. Randy, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I'm not so sure it's US Sailing's part. It's important, I think, for US Sailing to maybe re-educate the organization, the organizational authorities that are actually running these events, because yes, I totally agree with the gentleman. You can't, we just went through a couple of rough weekends here in Charleston, and my shoulder's still sore from setting that weather mark and pulling that weather mark. So I agree with them totally. But yeah, it's, PROs, it's, are the heart and soul of events. So it's important that we recognize them, but yeah, they wouldn't be what they are without the anchor pullers and mark movers that are out there that assisting them. So yeah, it's a tough question to answer, I think, with US Sailing, other than us organize, maybe educating our members that are organizing authorities running events and making sure that they understand that the anchor pullers and mark movers and stuff are, an important part of the event, is just as the PRO is, as well as all the volunteers, whether it's shoreside, whatever. It takes an army to run these events, whether it's a small event or a big event. So, and we certainly can't do it without the volunteers.
Amen. I have a follow-up for Randy and Charlie. In your report, clearly no one intends to ignore, what's the questioner say, ignore the dedicated volunteers. I don't think there can't be an intention to ignore them, but the question is, how do you show them appreciation? They're not feeling the love. So what were some of your recommendations, or what are some things you guys are thinking about to help these volunteers feel some appreciation from US Sailing, which I know is there, but how do you get that over to them? What are some of your thoughts?
Randy, you want to go first, or you?
Yeah, go. Yeah, I guess I'll go. I mean, again, I think that I don't. it's just that, it's the appreciation and recognition of the time and effort they put in towards supporting the sport that we all love so much. And again, Charlie, hopefully, you might have a better answer, but I know for me, it's always been about the appreciation of a job well done. So it's important.
Yeah, we had several we got this input. We asked one question about volunteer appreciation, and we have several recommendations that have to do with that. The big part is just making sure we have a checklist and advice for OAs. Here's how you should be appreciating the race committee that's at the event. And then also for race officials, there was some suggestions about acknowledging years of service, highlighting race officials in our marketing pieces and materials, having swag available on the website so that we can brand our race officials so they look really sharp and they're walking with their certified race official jacket, and someone looks over and goes, oh, okay, that's somebody who's gone to the effort of getting certified. And then just the acknowledgement. So that should be something that committees are working at. We want to make sure that as people get their certification in a timely way, they get acknowledged for it and they get their certificate that says, I'm an umpire. And then just the thank yous at events, the thank yous between events, and just being shown that they're a valued part of the organization.
Randy, I'm going to ask you a question that I should know the answer to, but I know in the judging program, there's regional administrative judges. So each region has a overall person who's looking after the judges in that area. And I'm sure that person could be helpful in passing along the thanks and appreciation. They know these people. Is there a similar structure in race management of regional administrators?
Absolutely. So, I mean, that could be cultivated, made part of that culture, I guess, would be a good way to do it.
Sure.
Do it there. I think it's an important piece of being a race official is being able to manage your volunteers and appreciate your volunteers as well. Good friend of mine not long ago goes, Randy, I can't alienate these guys on Saturday because I've got this regatta goes on through Sunday. So I've got to really be nice to those guys. It's true, but it's part of race management. Sure.
Well, staying on this line, Peter, you're the marketing person. As background of the next question, let me read the background. The feedback was, I think we do a good job in actual training of officials, but I find it hard to recruit people, this person writes. I'm a certified judge, race officer, and instructor. In my state, there are 44 clubs and 3 YRAs. For these 44 clubs, there's 18 certified race officers and 5 certified judges. One of the survey questions asked if the training programs are serving your needs and was broadly answered yes. I think it may be working for individuals, but not so much serving the needs of the clubs more broadly. Round figures, less than half of my area clubs have any certified race officials. So my question is, how do we get more people interested in becoming certified? What can U.S. Sailing give to those at the grassroots to involve people in the training program? It's an issue when a club doesn't have any certified officials to be mentors.
Well, I think from a marketing and communication standpoint, I'm going to look at it from it's a great question, and I want to look at it from 2 standpoints. One is, kind of broad education and awareness, and really getting out there in kind of broad vehicles, looking at, we did a brand campaign last year called Sail With Us. And as part of that, we highlighted race administration as one of the, cool, fun areas that people can get involved in. And then, provided a link for people to come and click on that and find out more. And I think that, by seeing those videos and seeing, the what was going on and providing that level of education, I think it just generates that interest and awareness that hopefully will kind of broadly engage the sailing community. And then, we do that, through with videos on social, emails through the weekly lift and through quarter deck to clubs, and other kind of outreach. And then there's, that gets married up a little bit with the targeted efforts, things that we can do directed more to the clubs, giving them, a marketing toolkit that they can use, within their clubs to aid recruitment. So, if you start out broad and then all of a sudden, people are already starting to get educated, then these, the toolkit that we can provide that can go out in member newsletters and such, that could then reaffirm the message and give them a little bit more of a direct pathway into race administration through, linking over to a website that we have that provides, ideas of different on different options and courses, video testimonials of other people like them that have gotten into it and can speak highly about it. And then, certainly providing the opportunity for clubs, flag officers and boards to be able to talk and educate their members. So I think that combined kind of helps to, get that, educate that grassroots and drive more interest in certification.
Well, for sure, there's a few people on the board and these committees, and then there's a lot of people in the grassroots. So how to connect it is always the question. And one of our listeners has asked a great question, maybe Randy, back to you. How does U.S. Sailing look at the regional sailing associations, such as the IOIA, in developing race officials? In other words, as part of your program, do you do an outreach to them and get them involved in generating candidates and doing some of the training? Or is it all done at the U.S. Sailing level?
It's mostly done at the U.S. Sailing level. It's interesting by area and the participations in areas. It varies greatly, as far as what they're able to accomplish. So it's not, I guess we should be looking at going into the regions, a little bit better than what we do. I'm not going to say that we cover that as well as we should, but that's a great opportunity for us, for sure.
Hey, Dave, this is Jack. I'll just add to that, because I know that in some areas there's, and I think it's where, staff or some of the volunteers and the leadership have connections with the RSAs, where we do have a little bit better engagement. So in Barnegat Bay, or, even Randy down in your neck of the woods, there seems to be more engagement where we'll work on hosting, seminars in conjunction with their annual meetings or things like that. But it is a really good point that we should definitely tap into the RSAs more with some, sort of programming suggestions, or start to develop, I think, closer ties with those groups, and probably get some feedback from them on what we can do to help promote in their area. What would be helpful for them. I think, what's come out of a lot of this, this feedback on the surveys are sort of ideas of things that are needed, this grassroots. It's not necessarily the advanced race officer that we're looking for, but how do we, bring in better mark boat operators, or just getting some fundamental education to the core volunteers. And so that's becoming, okay, we got to do that. Now we got to reach out and find out what the best way to do that is. Because whether it's, us sitting in Bristol, or some of the volunteers that are in their different areas, as Randy said, these regions are also different on how they operate. So I think, reaching out and engaging with the leadership of those groups that are focused on, race official training, and some of the things that we can do to help them would be great. We don't have all the answers, but we certainly have some of the tools that we can leverage.
Well, clearly, we all could. Having more people dedicated to race administration is a good thing, and I think the grassroots recruiting is the grassroots associations and clubs. That's they know the people and they know who they can tap, and so that's a good idea. And along that line, another listener who happens to be one of the best PROs out there, but I won't mention his name, asked, if someone was interested in getting involved in race administration, what should they do? What suggestions do you have to someone who says, I'd like to get more involved in running races or hearing protests or whatnot? What advice do you give them? What's their path?
I'll jump. I mean, we go back to the regional, but it's the area reps for that particular discipline, reaching out to them. If not, reach out to the national chair of that discipline as well. I mean, I think that's all of our responsibilities to get those people engaged. And probably, no better than the chair of that committee.
Sure. And I'm sure pretty much everyone who's in on this call right now, in on this town hall, probably is someone that if someone else went up to them and said, how do I get involved? They'd be able to answer the question. So sometimes it's a matter of just putting your hand up and said, hey, ask me. Is anybody, if you're interested, just come and talk to me. And I think everyone on this group can help on that. Before we transition into the next section, Corey and Jack, there's still some remaining chat on the YouTube among the audience about the money and the perception that, pretty much all the money goes to the Olympics, that it's a very, that's where the money goes. And somebody else asked, what percent of the money does go, of U.S. sailing money, go to race administration? So Jack and Corey, can you adjust that in some way, please?
Sure, I'll take the first stab at that. First of all, the Olympic program and the investment in Olympics is, in a way, it's self-funded. They receive funds from donors, from the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and from sponsors. That's how that part of the business is funded. Membership dollars at this point are sort of indirectly supporting that, in that they are supporting some of the support services within the association. But as far as dollars going to pay for coaching, for technology, for travel, for logistics, game support, that's sort of funded through a separate set of resources. As far as the dollars, membership dollars, the resources that go to race administration, I saw that on the chat, and the numbers specifically, I don't have them exactly right now, but I'm happy to get back to you on that. I don't want to give you a false number. One of the comments that came out of this whole survey and recommendations was we need more staff and resources on this. And I'm not going to disagree with that. I think we can definitely do a better job and put appropriate resources there to do a lot of these things that these recommendations came out with. I do want to sort of set one thing straight, though. While Matt Hill might be the person that's listed in the race administration department, and there's only one person there, he is supported by Perry and Andy in scheduling that help with the scheduling of the seminars. He's supported by Rachel in operations that handles the certificate processing and a lot of the logistics on material shipping and things like that. He's supported by Lucy, who's working with Dave as well on the appeal side of things. And then he's supported by Peter and his team from a communication standpoint. So there's a team of support underneath Matt and the things he does. And I think what we've learned as we've gone through this reorganization over the past several years is that what we need to do is really align specific people more directly with some of these initiatives that have been outlined that we're going to be undertaking. Really coordinate the sort of the objectives and accountability of different people for this. So that's sort of what we're looking for in 2021. And I will say that this project has given us some really good input and recommendations on things that we can be improving upon. The staffing and resources is certainly one of them. Race administration is a department that brings in, very little revenue. So it is basically supported by membership dollars to do that. And it's a critical part of what we do. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, everybody that's out sailboat racing benefits from the work that you all do, the work that Randy and his committee members do, Dick Rose and Rob Overton on the rules side of things. So we need to work on getting that message out and bringing in more resources to support this whole initiative.
Great. Well, good questions, good answer. Corey, go ahead.
Yeah, and from the board point of view, and we set policy and we look at the organization as a whole. And one of the things we did with this whole COVID shutdown was we entered into a strategic refocus project. And one of the questions we asked were, what are our core responsibilities as the national governing body of the sport of sailing? And, from my point of view, and I think a lot of the members of the board, we feel that racing is core to what we are and where we came from. And therefore, the support of the services that provide racing to our sailors, and I speak from a lot of experience. I'm a real beneficiary of a lot of those services. I've done a ton of racing, not much race committee or judging, a little bit, but mostly I'm the sailor who's benefited from all these great services of having great race courses out there and fair jury when we come in off the water if we need to go that route and to solve a dispute. And racing is really important to this organization. It's core. It's how we started. We were the United States Yacht Racing Union, and we need to support that. And our board is really focusing in on the right balance of all the things we need to do. And competitive services and serving the racing community is absolutely fundamental to what we do. And so that's a great question. And we are really looking at how much we are going to emphasize focus in that area, how much we should with all the other things we have to do that come under our responsibilities. But we really are looking at it hard and, getting this research and understanding what we can do in small steps first and then more is really key. And I think, the biggest thing is that unlike other sports, where our sailors, who are the heavy users of our race officials, other sports participants are required to be members of the organization that trains their race officials. In our sport, that's not the case. And we need to move to a model where our racers want to be members of US Sailing, understand that when they are, they're supporting all of the services that are provided to them. And I will certainly be the first one who will talk to any of my fellow racers and say, yeah, we need to join US Sailing to support this core part of our sport.
All right. Corey, I'm going to stay with us. This getting some traction in the chat. And Jack, there was a mention that race administration is not a revenue producer. And the suggestion is you might want to reword that comment. So how would you respond to that, Jack?
Race administration is not a revenue producer. That was what I intended to say. I mean, the revenue that it brings in through seminar fees and things like that is, a minority of what we run up in expenses on what we budget on an annual basis to run the department.
Right, but I know what you mean. You're not saying that because it's not a revenue producer, we're not going to give it any attention.
No. What I'm saying is that we are investing membership dollars into it. We're investing sponsorship revenue into it to fund that important part of the business.
Yeah, it's not like a small sport at a college. They're not going to give them any money to the pick the team because they're not a revenue producer. We certainly care about, and obviously care about race administration. And as Corey just said, the board is looking carefully at it. They've created this whole task force. Unlike there's no other task force right now looking at other things. So they're very interested in looking at it, and they know they want to spend some more attention. And if they can spend more dollars, they have to figure all that out. But the commitment, Corey, on the board is we want to help race officials get better, feel more appreciated. We want to improve the services. And we're trying to, that's the whole point of this exercise. Would you say that's true, Corey?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, listen, let's move on to the next phase. The next phase is going to be, so here we are in this COVID situation, and people are trying to recertify. They don't want to travel. People are, they've taken the test, but now how do they become certified if they can't do regattas, because there are no regattas? There's a lot of questions along that. So that'll be the next line of thinking here. One of the questioners said, how do we go forward and start running regattas these days? Well, that's not really the subject of tonight. And that's a when it's safe, you can go outside answer. There are a lot of events that are running, and I would encourage anyone who's interested to just contact the events you see in Scuttlebutt or other places and contact them and find out what their protocols are and what they've been doing. I know at Oak Cliff Sailing, they've been running many regattas. The New York Yacht Club ran some spectacular regattas this fall out on the West Coast, as Jeff mentioned, Jeff Johnson and offline mentioned. So if you're interested and not sure what to do or how to go about it, contact those that have been doing it and go ahead. But let's focus on the race officers here. Jack, this question is going to be to you. My PRO certification expires next year. To remain certified, I need to attend a refresher class within a year. Not wanting to travel this time due to COVID, have you given any thought to online classes or extending certifications for a couple of years? I know that most of the race officials are getting up there in age and are reluctant to travel at this time.
So thanks, Dave. There is a policy that was implemented over the last several months that if a extension is needed, that a request be made and it will be granted, I believe, for a year. So if your certification is coming up for renewal, you're unable to renew it because of a educational requirement, put in a request to the committee and they'll grant you an extension for a year. As far as I've been following the chat a little bit, one of the first things we did when everything got locked down back in April, we shifted pretty much all of our education resources onto moving, basic race management or the one-day race management seminar and club judge seminar online. And so that's an effort to, provide a venue and an opportunity to take these classes without having to be there in person. So there's that opportunity. And I think, Dave, as you said, the environment of needing to be out and advance your certification through event experiences, we don't have any control over that. So we're trying to accommodate the things that we can control and be receptive and open to that. And I think we've taken a good first step with that. And then work, hard to put some great courses and great material online that, Jeff Johnson and others were very involved in helping get online.
Great. Let's stay with the recertification challenge. And this is going to be to Charlie and Randy. And this is there's a little background of this question, so I'm just going to read it. The basic question is there a way to restructure recertification for both race management and judging so that it is truly a recert and not simply retaking the entire class over? And by the way, this has nothing to do with COVID. They're just asking, is there a way to streamline the recert? And the question goes on, like for driving, get your driver's license, you don't retake the whole written exam followed by the road test each time you renew. And the question goes on, is there a way to streamline the re-education process so there might be an online highlight of something the race management or judging groups want to highlight for that year? Perhaps there's been an appeal where the protest committee incorrectly applied the rules, or there was an expert that would like to create a short video on how to collect facts. Race management, perhaps there's some new technique that needs to be emphasized? Is there a way to put together short video content? And the final point this person is making is it's very difficult to carve out time these days to continually maintain certifications. This person says, I'm fortunate enough to have a job in the sailing industry, but I often have to pull myself away from my actual job to get a certification for my volunteer job. So thoughts on streamlining the recertification process so that it's still got quality, but isn't such a time sucker.
Let Charlie answer that.
Okay.
I can start with the judges have done a really good job of continuing education requirements and promoting continuing education like protest day and roundtables so that it isn't just taking the same seminar over and over again. And the umpire committee was in the process of starting to develop continuing education as well. So I know those two groups are working hard to do that. I'm not as familiar with race management. I know that Jeff Johnson had given some feedback on that. He's off. He's busy answering questions on the chat right now. But so I know that there is a concerted effort recognizing that just taking a seminar over and over, even if it's only every 4 years, can just get redundant and old. And so there is work to make sure that we are working on continuing education that can be more useful, like the question is asking.
All right. Anyone else in the panel want to add to that? I do know I'm more familiar with the judges side, and the roundtable discussions are excellent. They're targeted. They're a much higher level. They assume the person knows all the basics, and now it gets into actually talking about scenarios. This happened, that happened. So that's very helpful. I know Bruce Cook and others have pioneered these protest simulation sessions. We're going to get into a second. How do you get certified as a judge if you need to hear protests if no one's protesting? So they actually create a weekend of protests, and you actually go through them and like in real time, and that's a way to do it. So that's clever. So I know there's people thinking about it, and if anyone out there has ideas, I'm sure if you just contact Matt with them, they'd love to hear about it. So now let's go to the other piece of this. Now you're eager to get certified, and you take the test and you pass the test. And now you find out, or now you know that you need to be a PRO at an event or two in order to become certified as a PRO. And you look around in this COVID time and all the regattas are gone, or not all gone. Many are gone. So, and the same is true for judging. So, Charlie, in your research and in the report, do you have recommendations for people? How do you handle a situation where you're not certified yet, you're on the path, but now you have to do live events in this day and age? Any suggestions for that dilemma?
Yeah.
Understanding that COVID is nobody's fault, but
right. But even before COVID, that was a concern that people were expressing. How do I get invites to other areas? And what we want to do is create a more organized process for that, because I'll get a call from someone, hey, Charlie, what can I do? And, oh, well, you should reach out to Jeff. I know Jeff in San Diego, or I know Lynn in New York. And, so because I know these people. So we want to make that networking more open. So it still is about networking. It's who you meet and who you've worked with. One thing that I suggest is get your club to invite people from other areas. So if you invite someone from another area, say, hey, come do this event at our club, and then maybe I can come do an event at your club. So there is a networking going on that that allows people to get out of area when they're trying to go for regional between club race officer. So and from the judging and umpiring standpoint, it's a lot of, you know, hey, I'm available, and I can get myself there. So I know going from club to regional, it's a lot of just letting people know that you're interested, calling up the championship chair and say, hey, do you have any space on your jury? So it's a lot of outreach, but we do want to make it a little bit not organized. I'm not sure that's what I want to use the term, but make it more accessible, you know, so make events more accessible, identify, especially if we're looking to create race officers, some of these clubs that don't have a race officer at all, if we can get those people coming to clubs that are really organized and have a lot of events and get them on the race committee. You're probably going to start off on a mark set boat, and then work yourself maybe onto the signal boat. You're not going to just come in cold and say, well, I'm going to PRO your, you know, national event, but being willing to volunteer and being a good team player, and then trying to reciprocate so that your club is inviting people from out of the area to do events at your club too. And so in the days of COVID now, it's the same process. It's just finding clubs that are actually holding events. It's a little bit harder with COVID because I know a lot of clubs are keeping their race committee in a bubble. So they have the same 3 people running, you know, the Friday night races and the Wednesday night races. And so it's definitely challenging in COVID, but another, you know, once COVID's over, the high school and the college sailing is an area where they're always looking for volunteers, and that's a good way to get some experience. And you can travel to a college regatta, you'll meet some folks from that town and work on trying to get invited to one of their events.
To laser focus the question, and thank you for that answer. One of the questioners says, I'm trying to become an NRO, a National Race Officer. And now I'm having trouble getting, I think you have to be a PRO at least once, maybe a couple events. I'm not sure the details in order to become certified. And this gentleman is having difficulty finding that. And so does, maybe a question for Randy or Jack, has the race admin, do we, Charlie mentioned, you know, clubs going out of area. Do we solicit, do the area race officers ever say to clubs in your area, let us know when you're holding regattas, when you're looking for a PRO, you know, sort of like a clearinghouse, if you will, so that, you know, I'm trying to find an event, I can go to my area RO, and that person says, oh yeah, look, here's 3 events. There's one in here, one in there. Here's the contact. You know, you got to do the legwork. I mean, obviously we can't, they have to take the initiative, but they're looking for if they don't know who to contact, can we be more helpful, I guess is the question and my question.
You know, would it be, the judges do this well, where they've got a mentoring program, you know, for judges that want to, you know, escalate their certification. We don't have that for the race officials yet, but I know we've been talking about it. Yeah, the national race officer level is a tricky level for sure. I think the demands of a national race officer are pretty high these days. So, I mean, we're pretty careful, I guess, I want to say, or pretty protective of that national race officer status, because we wouldn't want to put him in a situation and set him up for failure or whatever. So it's much better to mentor them, I think. In the COVID times, are there enough events, you know, to get them to qualify? That's a tough thing. But in the meantime, I don't know why that person couldn't be mentored or, you know, set up, you know, to work along the existing national race officers that do have events to work, you know, and share that wealth a little bit.
Sure seems to me some good conversations can be had in the race management committees, the race management, the umpires and the judges, on how to connect better with the grassroots and get people in the pipeline, and then how to be even more helpful to those that are trying. Now they're trying, they're in the pipeline, and how do we help them succeed? Let's be part of the success of these people, and like that. So, well, thank you for that. And and I'm sure people out there, anyone listening who are certified have gone through this process, and you've got some suggestions for people in your area and like that. On the issue of gender, are there any, Jack, are there any outreaches from U.S. Sailing specifically to get more women involved in race administration?
Thanks, Dave. Believe that we recently scheduled 2 race management classes specifically for women that would be taught, proctored, delivered by women race officials and instructors. I think I will say that prior to that discussion and that organization, I don't think that had been a focus, but it sounds like from my understanding, and Matt can type in here, but I believe they filled up, and we're going to be scheduling more. So that's, I think that what we've learned, and I think through some of this research, is that, some women like to be in a group with other women and be instructed by women. And, we want to provide all the different platforms and variations of these courses that we can. So, we're learning on this. There's a lot of things that we can be working towards. So
good.
That's the one that I know of, and I'm not sure, Randy, if any of the other committees are making any moves in this area, but that's the one that I'm aware of.
It's the only one I know of.
Well, let's do more of it. Well, okay.
I just would say, kudos to the communications team. We had a couple of great articles. The diversity, equity, and inclusion committee talked about women in sailing. We also had a great article about women race admin. So we're getting the messaging out about getting more women involved.
Fantastic. All right. Well, that was our segment on the frustrations of certification in the COVID era. And anyone who has ideas or can be helpful here. It's, we've all had to readjust our bars a little bit. So hang in there. But now we just have a few miscellaneous questions, and we're going to go to my friend Tony Ray. And Tony, basically the question is, I'm an amateur race officer running races for these professional sailors who are making their living doing it. Talk to me. They seem pretty demanding. I'm doing my best. I'm paying to be there in a sense. So what's being done to organize the professional sailors, and maybe what can be done to help them be part of the solution in improving race management?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. It's an interesting topic. So there's a word you used earlier in our discussion, which was pride. And that's something that really resonated with me when you describe the sort of what are the benefits, what's in it for me, what's in it for us, whether it's sailors or race admin, anywhere throughout the sport. And the fact of the matter is that we, speaking as a sailor, if we take pride in what we do as sailors, then what we should be doing is not just trying to get trophies. What we're trying to do is to help grow our sport. We're all part of that, whether we're volunteer race officers, whether we're professional race officers, regatta organizers, judges, any other admin, sailors of any level. We're all more like stewards of our sport. And so, as opposed to just sort of takers. And that's my attitude about all sailing professionals, really. In fact, the way I look at it, I know we've all spoken about this at the board level. And so this initiative we're working on is an association for the sailing professional, which is a way to legitimize the career path of the sailing professional, which is not just the racer, but it's the coach, and it's the coach at all levels. The way I think of it is that racers aren't just racers, pro racers, rather they're like player coach. And we have to have that attitude. And so that's something that I'm working on personally with my peer group. I've been really fortunate to play in the sport at a high level for a really long time. And I think that the give back side tells me that it's really an important thing, not just to improve the teams I'm sailing with, but also the people I'm sailing against, and make it more inclusive. And I think a big part of that includes working with the race committees. So as far as how to address certain issues, thankfully, I haven't seen a lot of that, of sort of conflicts between race admin, volunteers, race committee mark droppers, and pro sailors necessarily. But quite often we're all out there, tempers get high. You might say something in a mark boat that gets too close, or the line's not square, or somebody complains to the race committee. We've all seen that, whether we're pros or amateurs. I think the most important piece of that is that we all need to, all of us, sailors and race officials, need to figure out a mechanism where we can have some communication on shore. And I have to say that the best race officials that I've worked with, been on the course with, regattas with over the years, are the ones that actually make a point of coming up in the parking lot and saying, "Hey, Tony," or "Hey, whoever, hey, Dave, what'd you think out there? What'd you think of the course? Was the top mark too far to the left? Was the line too long?" Soliciting feedback at the morning meeting, sending a note to a sailor that that feedback's important, and it is a two-way street. I think it's incumbent on the pro sailing community to get involved, with the race officials to try to give input, constructive input where it's helpful. But it's also helpful if the race officials, volunteers at any level, if you're walking by some sailors, whether they're pros or amateurs, "Hey guys, what did you guys think of the starting line? Do you think we should have gone for a fourth race today?" Or, part of that is the community getting to know each other, which is sort of fun. And I think it's an important thing for both race admin and the sailors to spend time socializing a bit too, before and after, whether it's coffee in the morning or a cold beverage after, just to kind of do a bit of that feedback. We're all stewards of what we're doing. And so, I put it as much to the sailors as to the race officials to figure out how to be inclusive that way. It should be a two-way street. I'm curious if there's any specific incidences, God, even offline, if you guys want to get in touch with me, I'm happy to chat through it. We had a few of those in the past. I had one this summer that I heard about, that I tried to help counsel the race officials on how they should address it. If there's anything that happens that's really untoward, we obviously have a mechanism within the racing rules. Thankfully, it's very rare, but it does exist, Rule 69. And we do have that mechanism in place. As far as what we're trying to build for the Association of Sailing Professionals, one important piece of that is a code of conduct, which we are working on. COVID and life itself has gotten pretty busy for all of us this summer, but it's something we're going to pick up in the coming months to try to get that more formalized, more in place, to attract the sailors to join the group. There will be benefits for them, but what's asked is to sign the code of ethics, which is to agree that that our sport's unique, it's self-policing, and we need to take pride in that fact, be stewards of what we do, and actually lead with integrity and make sure that we leave the sport better than how we found it. And working with our race officials to make it better is a part of that.
Well, wonderful, Tony. And, you're a pro sailor, and, you're highly regarded. I think probably most race officials love it when you're there. And you set a great example. Randy, you have professional sailors at Charleston Race Week. I'm down there myself. Have you any advice for not amateur, that's the wrong word, volunteer race officers dealing with professional sailors on their course? Is that part of your handbook?
It is. I agree with Tony. In the past couple weekends ago, we had a number of pro sailors out there, and it was a real pleasure to see the PRO, take their input. And I think my suggestion for race officials and PROs is, I think sometimes there's some tension between the pro and the PRO. That pro that's out there is there to make sure his owner, whoever he's sailing with, is having a good time. And that's what Tony is saying. They're stewards of the sport. They're not being, if they're suggesting something might be better managed on the race course, they're doing it to the benefit of all the sailors. And sometimes it's taken the wrong way. So I'm always really interested in hearing what the principal race officers' opinions are. And unfortunately, I've learned to know a lot of the pros out there, so I know what they're actually trying to accomplish. And, and I've learned that, yeah, they're in there for the good of the sport. So let's take their advance. I mean, they're sailing 300 days a year. That PRO could be, running races, 15 days a year, so there's a little bit of advantage there that pro has, but you've got to take it and make the best of it.
Well, Randy, if I could, I might just jump in there. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and that, it's important to remember too that, whether you're pro or amateur, we're all out there to win. And, I can appreciate that a lot of times when, out of frustration, I might, Lynn Lynch might send me a text from New York Yacht Club, go, hey, what'd you think of the start or starting line or any input? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to hold my tongue here because I had a crappy start in that race. And I thought that the line shouldn't have been pin favored or something, And so the fact of the matter is the inputs can be constructive. And I have a lot of respect for race officials that take your input and then basically they ignore it and they do what they think's right. And that's what they should do. Now, whether they're ignoring it or not, maybe that's putting too fine a point on it. They can take our input if they want, but ultimately it's your race course. You guys are here to do a job, whether you're pro or amateur as a race official. And so as sailors, we've got to understand that, you're not always going to agree with it. You don't want to always agree with the umpire or the referee call in any sport, but that's part of sport, and so you just suck it up and you maybe have a chat at the dock and talk about a disagreement. But I appreciate race officials that say, hey, I got a job to do here and this is how we're doing it. So I think that also goes both ways. By the way, one more comment on this. Been really impressed over the years. I mean, I hate to say decades, but it's decades at how good it's gotten. It's just good. I mean, it didn't used to be this good. It used to be, it's a silly expression, but the old boys network, right? The yacht clubs are out there and they have a couple of cold beverages and they're dropping marks in and they're done when they're done and that's it. I mean, the level of regattas the quality regattas I've sailed in Southern California, in Texas, in Florida, all over New England, and I do a lot of travel in Europe, not this year, but normally, the level is really, really high. And I've watched it improve. And I think a big reason is because of the certification program that U.S. Sailing's got. So we're doing something right in the big picture. And the fact that we're here tonight is a testament to that. The fact that there's a place where the race officials can be heard. I think it's positive. I think we need to do more of it. So anyway, I'll let you guys carry on.
Okay, well, wonderful. Well, it's a great thing you're doing, Tony, and with others. And thank you for that. Just a couple more questions and then we'll do some wrap ups. Corey, the question has come up again, maybe Peter, maybe I'll get Peter, you can start off on this, but in general, we all would love to see more sailors be members of U.S. Sailing. And of course, a rising tide floats all boats and it would give us more revenue and we could give more services to our race administration, race officials. So what are some of the tangible things that U.S. Sailing is doing and looking at, Peter, Jack, or Corey, to get more members? And then how could the people, the choir, so to speak, that's here, how can they be helpful in that?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly looking at ways, multiple ways that, as Corey mentioned, we're going through a kind of strategic, focus right now, trying to look at ways that we can make sure that we're delivering value for the members, focus on what the members' needs are. And I know that, it kind of goes along with recruitment right now. We're looking at, one of the things we're doing is a kind of influencer campaign, which is, using the idea is to go out and get people who are in the industry and are have significant roles to be able to, discuss what their roles are and discuss the importance of membership, to help those resources come into the organization so they can be reinvested in, important areas like race administration. And so I know that, some of the influencers that would be great to have will be, race administration folks that are out there, that are, all over the country and, are certainly a big part of clubs and organizations, and can certainly, help drive some of that interest as part of their role.
Great. Jack, I know you don't go to bed a single night without thinking about membership. So a couple bullet points that you're working on that we don't have to.
Yeah, sure. So many of you are also out in the One Design community, and Betsy Allison kicked off a project end of last year, beginning of this year, of connecting with the One Design community through the fleets to understand just what their issues were, what kind of support we could provide, what are some of the tools and resources that would be helpful. She did a survey, got a lot of input, a lot of participation from the volunteers, formed, I think, 5 working groups that took on different areas of things that would be helpful. And, what we're trying to do through that whole exercise is in these core areas of what we think are prospective members and our current members, is understand them a little bit better and what we need to do to deliver support to them. We've got our basket of benefits. We deliver the rules. We support all these different programs, but what are some of the specific things we can do for these audiences, like this adult racing community? And then as we build a relationship with them, develop a communication link and sort of a dynamic relationship, we can then start to cultivate memberships and sell them a value proposition. The challenging thing is we're removed a level or two from the sailors. Their affinity is with their clubs, with their One Design classes, with the junior programs, and it's not always easy to get a message all the way down in there. We don't have our budget basically for U.S. Sailing, the association, is about $6.5 million a year, and we cover a lot of ground with that. So a broad-based marketing program is really challenging. And as Peter said, we're trying to use our network of people that believe in what we do, that believe in what you do, to deliver the message. And I think, what else we could be helpful for us is for all of you that are out there, conveying the value that this, race management program and this credentialing and the certification provides. And say, that's supported by us as volunteers, and it's supported by the national governing body. I mean, it's something that takes all of us. We don't have that at this point, an insurance sort of sanctioning hook that makes it sort of a no-brainer to join. Those are things that we're looking at, but we're picking up members one by one. We're working on delivering a lot of value, like we did over this COVID crisis with the Starboard Portal and the online leadership forums that we ran. The support we provided a lot of yacht clubs, and it is coming back and paying back to us. Our membership renewal rates are increasing, are up. Our members have been really responsive and supportive to us, and that's enabling us to keep our programs going.
Good. Well, I just encourage everyone on this call to think of, 10 people. See if you can get 10 new members to start the year in 2021. That's the way it goes. I'm always looking for non-members to encourage them to join. It can't be done from way up here. It's done in personal contacts. Charlie, anything on the review board? There was a question. Are there any discussion about the review board? Is that a race admin under your tent?
So the review board isn't directly in the race admin section, but the investigating complaints and handling complaints by the certifying committees is. So there's a separate working party that has been developing a complaint process and working with our compliance manager to make sure that the process we have is the regulations follow the USOPC guidelines, and now as an act of Congress, the congressional guidelines, and also that the review board has the training it needs to perform its duties. And part of the complaint process, we asked people how they would feel about complaining about a race officer. And what we want to see is the complaints differentiated between a performance error where they're not doing as good a job at delivering their responsibilities as a race officer on the race course or in a jury room or through an umpired event, as opposed to some other behavior that is beyond the sailing performance. So we're trying to differentiate that, get out the more complicated ethical behavior questions out of the committee chairs and committee processes and into the HR professionals at US Sailing and the compliance manager. So the board, you'll see some stuff on the review board and regulations that are getting updated as part of our work on the board of directors, but not as a direct result of this report. But we did ask the question and got some feedback on that from the different committees.
Great. And Charlie, while you're here, two questioners. One person asked, hey, was there anything negative that came out in the report that, that is a real problem you're trying to solve? And then the other person said, was there anything that surprised you? Either positive or negative? Did anything, take your breath away when you read the report that you weren't expecting? So they're curious. So, was there anything on the dark side, and was there anything surprising?
So I would say, for me personally, kind of the dark side was the lack of agreement that the board is in tune with the race officials. As a fellow race official on the board, I know we're trying to make sure that the board has the perspective of race officials, but I think we need to do more, and a lot of it is communication. And so we have a lot of recommendations of having a town hall, getting board members to attend committee meetings, not like you attending your own committee meeting, but board members attending different committee meetings so that they understand the workings of US Sailing. We don't have the AGM in the spring meeting where a lot of stuff happens in the hall and you're just a board member walking down and you sit in on the commercial sailing committee or you sit in on the judges committee. So we don't have that interaction anymore. So we need to improve the lines of communication. We had a lot of people that either didn't know if the board was in tune or disagreed that it was. And so I think we want to get that positivity number much higher. And then not surprising, but we did ask about instructors of the seminars and having a certification for people to become instructors. And we saw a huge, like over 60% of the respondents, even those who were instructors themselves, thought it was important to have instructors get trained to do the seminars. And so that's another recommendation that we came up with was for the certifying committees to come up with a training program for the instructors. So we raise the quality of the seminars. And we've got the educational department of US Sailing involved in really what I call professionalizing the seminars and the slide decks and the different processes we use to teach what we teach.
Well, great. Well, I really encourage people to read the report if they haven't. It's 21 pages, I know, but it's loaded with suggestions and ideas. And so to finish up here, Jack, we've got the several questions about what is US Sailing doing to help raise the rules knowledge of the race officials. Particularly, we have new rules going into effect on January 1st. As we all know, for 4 years now, they're going to try giving port tack right of way as a chance to kind of, speed things up a little bit and make people interested. So there's a few things just kidding. There's a few things people are wondering, what's US Sailing doing in terms of helping raising race officials and maybe their members' rules knowledge, what kind of products and what kind of programs might be available. Jack, come on off mute there and we'll hear your good answer.
Yep, thanks, Dave. We're just sent the 2021 to 2024 rule book to the publisher. Would love to thank the rules committee for all the work that gets done on that. That's a monumental undertaking. So that's coming out. Those will be sent to all the race officials as soon as they get back to us. We'll be sending those out so you have them, I guess, is before Christmas. We've also invested this year in a rules app, mobile app that'll work on an Apple or Android device that is index searchable, very flexible for sailors, and it's going to integrate some of the work that you do, Dave, from understanding the racing rules. There's also some really cool features about an online protest form that can be submitted electronically, as well as this whiteboarding app that'll allow you to sort of, rather than draw in separate boxes, you can create basically an animation of what happens. And I'm sure the judges will appreciate that, and not having to, try to interpret these scratchings that come in from people like me. So that'll make that a lot easier. And then it's really going to be a platform that we can add a lot of other features to. So that's sort of on the core rule side of things. Then we're republishing updated editions of Understanding the Racing Rules and the 100 Best Quizzes, which is great. Our role traditionally has not been in delivering rules education. We want to try to provide it through some of these publications. We also have the Sailor's Guide to the Racing Rules, which is that sort of short version that gives really the fundamentals. But then, Dave, you are working with others in actually delivering the rules education. And what we'd like to try to do is point interested parties to the other options that are available.
Yeah, we've had good meetings with Stu in the education department, and you, of course, Jack. And so Northview is providing their, every 4 years, they do rules seminars, which are not only new rules, but they're all the rules. And I'm also going to be doing a more advanced tactics and rules session through them. And US Sailing supporting and being partnering with that. Dave Dellenbaugh and I, he's on the rules committee, I'm on the appeals committee. We both do rules seminars. We've had a series called the Daves, which individuals can sign up for. And we're going to have one in January on the new rules. And we're all available for individual and club webinars and whatnot. So I think the answer is US Sailing is doing a good job of developing the products and helping the race officials with in their training sessions with the rules that the race officials need to know, and then they're helping fellows like myself and people like myself and Dave and Northview who are doing rules education to get it out to people in a way that's helpful. So, all right. Well, listen, we're drawing the end here. Randy, you're the chair of the Race Administration Division. Any summary remarks you'd like to make before we let people go have a cold one?
Yeah, I don't know if Matt can flip up that slide, but I mean, we've got a few things that I think are on the top of our list. That report provides, a plethora of things to go after, but, one of the tops on my list is really kind of this evaluation. What we're trying to do is, here we go, maybe it'll show up here shortly.
Yeah.
But I think it's just really important that we are able to sort of evaluate. I don't want to make it a challenge like it's a performance evaluation, but it is a kind of a customer service, survey really of how the race officials performed at various events. And, we've talked about it now for almost a year, but it's a complicated piece, but I think it's an important piece to provide, us, let's see if we can get back to, race at top, up one slide, I think. Let's see, one more slide.
Here we are.
There we go. So, develop that race of evaluation process, I think, is probably a key thing that we can really, it'll help us improve the performance of the race officials, help guide them, if there's things that they're missing. It's not a critical thing. It's really just an improvement process. And then I think we talked about earlier today too, is, recruit new volunteer committee members. Making sure that there's a pathway that they can see how they can get involved. And then, it's a question of, taking, improving, getting their path and giving them something to do that's worthwhile and, securing them for future volunteering. Member access, community procedures across disciplines. Easy for me to say. But anyway, I think that it's important that for the current race officials, judges, umpires, even maybe measures, that there's a consistency across that. And obviously each discipline is going to have something that's unique to them. But I'm going to venture to say that 85% of that can be consistent. So, it's easier for, a race management official to go into judging, so that we have a lot more people cross-trained. And then we talked about this earlier, the volunteer recognition at all levels. I think that again is an important thing, because we're not going to get anywhere without our volunteers. And, we need a ton of them. So to kind of keep it simple, I think those are the 4 crucial pieces that we need to work on as the race admin committee over the next year.
Great. Thank you, Randy. And thank you for all your work and your committees. Jack, anything you want to add to that from the
Sure.
staff side?
Why don't you, yeah, there we go. So there's quite a bit of overlap between what we're going to be working on from a staff perspective and, a couple of and some of the things that Randy mentioned. This report had, I don't know, what was it, Charlie, 60 plus recommendations, some of which we're working on now. Others are, I think, longer term, are going to take a longer time to fully implement. But what we saw in the report, and after spending a good deal of time with Charlie, is identifying what the priorities are for us for next year and what we're working integrating into our work plan and our budget for next year. So a big one that we came away with was this sort of instructor training and the instructor sort of qualification certification process. That's something that Stu and I and Matt have met on, and outlining the resources that are going to be needed for that. We want to work with the Race Administration Committee and Randy to understand, what is the priority there. We've got, race officers, judges, umpires. There's a lot of great comments in the chat that I've been seeing about, are we looking at grassroots stuff? What's important? Do we need top of the pyramid? And I think those are decisions that, we need to work together with the Race Administration Committee to define those. But, my sense, it's going to be focusing on some of the core fundamentals of race management, course delivery, the club judge course delivery, and then seeing what's sort of at the basic level for umpires. And then making sure that we're aligning and continuing to update the end user curriculum for that. As I said, we invested a good deal of time and resources on the online options for basic race management and club judge. We've adopted or implemented a new online platform called Canvas, which is going to be a really powerful tool for us to not only deliver education, but sort of track progress. So we're going to be continuing to develop that further. So I think focusing really on that delivery and availability of sort of the fundamental curriculum and training that we can share with a broader audience, and take advantage of technology to get to places, reduce costs for people to take it, and make it more interactive. So that's a key priority. The other we talked quite a bit about is, how do we get more people involved? How do we attract people? How do we share the value proposition of being a race official? So we're going to be investing in that. I think there's some great ideas came out of today of working with regional sailing associations and developing plans that will support them. One of the things that, as I mentioned, we have this sort of network of support for our staff and for Matt and his department. And I think one of the things we've learned is and I mentioned earlier, is really dedicating some resources. So having a dedicated operational person to support Matt and make sure that program and all the different people involved are running on all cylinders. And the same goes for a dedicated communications and marketing resource that can support Matt. And that's what's going to be instrumental in creating a successful marketing program for race administration. We got some input on how we can make the website more effective, clarifying sort of the pathway, how to get involved, making it, I think, a little more user-friendly from a newbie standpoint. So trying to bring that perspective into that. That's stuff that we, will be working on here in the short term. Randy talked about an effective race management, race official evaluation program. That's how do you get feedback? We've talked about collecting data from sailors. Then you have to figure out how you're going to apply that, what the process is, tracking it, how do you act on it? And I think that also sort of ties into this mentoring concept that's been discussed both on the chats here this evening, as well as a lot of feedback on that in the recommendations. So I think mapping out next year, what does the framework of an evaluation program look like? And, how do we get race management judges and umpires on the same page? So we're creating one platform for that and not three different ones. I think one of the challenges we have is we've got these three disciplines that, historically have grown up and done great things on their own. And now what we're trying to do is find the areas where we can identify commonalities and we can run them more efficiently, but also still give them the same flexibility that they need to deal with their specific constituencies and issues around their disciplines.
Great.
We talk about, if you want to move to the next slide, Matt, about how we recognize volunteers. And I think there's things that we can do from a staff execution administrative standpoint that we can do better. And it's recognizing when they hit milestones, when the certification needs to go out, the thank yous that happen when folks are either retiring or have accomplished something. Those are sort of process-oriented things that we need to put, just staff behind to put a workflow together so to make sure it gets done. It's interesting. Sometimes it has happened in the past when there's time, and then the next fire comes and some of that gets lost. So we have to address that. So that's an area. And, I think when people get certified, getting some recognition from the office, whether it's a piece of apparel or something, just to celebrate their accomplishment. Charlie talked about communication and whether that's between the volunteers and the committees and the board to making sure they're on the same page. It's between the staff, Matt, myself, and the board, and keeping them up to speed on what we're working on, as well as how we're communicating out to the volunteers. And a big one of one of the three key strategic priorities for us is how we're engaging with our members and how we're sort of delivering value and benefits for them. And we look at the race officials as a key constituency there. And so how do we create that communication channel and process that's getting information out and getting feedback back. And we've got, a lot of information and data in the database, and it's about connecting and, sort of mining that information to do a better job of connecting with all of you. And then finally, I talked about the staff resources. That's an issue that, that came across loud and clear. It came across today. And, so those are the 6 or 7 priorities that we have for next year. And, there's areas when you talk about, the volunteers, how can we help the committees, onboard people more effectively? What kind of support and resources can we provide in that area? I think these other topics that came up around, how do we share best practices for recognizing race officials out in the community, working with RSAs, working with clubs on what, successful programs are doing. That's stuff that we want to put people against and work into our communication cycle. So, those are 6 or 7 areas. There's a long list, but we have to focus in and prioritize some of these. that's where we ended up, and we want to work again with Randy and the race administration committee to hone in on those priorities.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jack. And I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight for all your great input tonight, before and during the session. I felt like a town meeting, a town hall, and I hope you felt you were heard and had a chance to share what you're thinking. And thank you again for all the time, the energy, and the resources that you personally give to help provide sailors in the United States with the best possible sailboat racing. Now, they couldn't play the game if you didn't come out and run the game for them. And I would suspect that many of them they just take for granted how expert you are without knowing what's going on behind it. But those of us in the know how much you put into it to get where you are, and how much you're going to continue to put into it. And so we thank you for all you do. And thanks to the panel. I thought you guys were very forthcoming tonight and tried to answer all the questions as honestly as you could. Thank you for your time and care and thoughtfulness tonight. And also for all the work you do to provide good education programs and certification programs and as much organization as you can. It's a huge country, and there's a lot of cats out there to herd. It's a lot of moving parts. So, but your heart's in it, your head's in it, and you're anxious to provide the best possible programs. And thank you also for listening to your constituency tonight. It's so important, and together we can do great things. So finally, U.S. Sailing is going to hold an open town hall this Saturday at noon. You can get the information, the links on the Starboard portal. In fact, the weekly lift came out tonight and it had information on it. And this is a chance, the board of directors will be there. And this is a chance for all sailors in the U.S. to hear what the direction is of U.S. Sailing. It's a stakeholders summit, if you will, where Corey and others will be explaining what the focuses are and the priorities are going forward. A chance to hear and be informed and give some input. So I encourage you to join us. Again, this is this Saturday at noon. Please tell anyone that you may know that might be interested. I think an informed constituency is a smart one and can do great things. So we'll see many of you on Saturday. In the meantime, thanks again for all you do, and thanks for being here tonight. I hope you enjoyed it, and good night.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.